PRI Engineering is a geotechnical consulting firm. They inform and make recommendations on the structural and foundational decisions that need to be made for, let's say, a solar array. They are also involved in projects requiring complete geotechnical investigation reports for battery storage projects. I'm joining Tom St. Onge to talk about risk management and the process of testing and design in the renewable sector. Coming up next. Welcome, Tom. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Maria. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So you're with PRI Engineering. So tell us about your organization.
PRI Engineering is a civil engineering consulting firm. What I would say, though, is more specifically, they specialize in geotechnical engineering. There's a group of professional and licensed engineers there, and supported by a fantastic field team, an operations team that are able to do a whole bunch of different consulting services, everything from traditional geotechnical engineering to construction inspection to materials testing. We have a couple labs, both one in Lindsay, Ontario, and one in Calgary, Alberta. Environmental engineering, and I think what I would say is we've really made a name for ourselves in the renewables industry as solar foundation experts. So programs for testing and design really is what we've made a name for ourselves for.
Tell us about the processes, that are involved with testing and design, let's say for a large scale solar array. Like, how do you mitigate the risks there and do the testing?
Yeah, great question. I think it starts very early on in the process. It would start with an initial geotechnical survey, really, and it could be something very, very high level. Having an expert out to visit the site to do, just a visual inspection of the ground prior to any development or design or planning can go a long way, right? You can help narrow down maybe site selection. You could identify any very early risks, and then once you've got that understanding, at least of the region and the ground, you can start to get into more focused work, which would consist of geotechnical investigations. So using a series of tests, boreholes, test pits to identify what's going on subsurface in the ground. And that's pretty common. You would see that for most projects, regardless of whether or not they're a renewable energy solar array or not. You would need to do a geotechnical investigation because it informs a whole bunch of things, not just the foundations. It will inform elements of the electrical engineering design. It will inform all kinds of different pieces of design. After a traditional geotechnical investigation, we would suggest that a deliberate testing program would be the next step if you were going to do this in a diligent and thoughtful way. And that would consist of an analysis, a desktop analysis of the geotechnical investigation summary report, and then a deliberate planning effort to come up with a testing program for this particular site.
The weather is very strong these days, a lot of changes. How do you, prepare for, I guess extreme weather events, but I guess it seems like all of them are extreme these days. But how do you help prepare against that?
Well, weather is you're absolutely right. Weather is it's increasingly visible. It's in the media. It's in our homes. It's where we live. How our team would address weather is we would use industry standards for a particular region to develop loads, and then we would design to those load factors. So if we're in a particularly windy region, Well, there would be an increased wind factor load that would be taken into account during the design process. Conversely, if we were somewhere where the soil composition was more sandy, well, that would be a consideration in our design, right? So
Right.
we would have to address that through the testing program and the design process. So things like wind tied
Mhm.
directly to weather is accounted for through the testing program and into the design process.
Yeah, and the freezing and the thawing and
Yeah, well, that's another
yeah.
great conversation, because what we found is um, a lot of our work has to do with that freeze thaw
Mm.
layer, and there's plenty of developers and engineering firms out there, specifically in the United States, that don't have an understanding the way we do in Canada about frost. And so PRI Engineering, we've invested heavily in our understanding of frost, what it does to the foundations, and how we need to address it.
Hmm. What current projects are you working on right now?
We're all over the place. I'll start
Yeah.
with that. We've had quite a bit of success in Western Canada, specifically Alberta and the prairies. There has been a ton of investment uh, in the prairies, and we have been at the forefront of some major projects out there. And our presence is growing, our team is growing, and the size of the projects we're working on is growing. I mean, we're talking humongous projects here. Um, Southern Alberta has been it's been a hotbed of renewable energy, specifically solar, for the last couple of years. So I'm kind of dancing around your question here, but I'll speak to regions more so
Yeah,
than particular projects.
sounds good.
We have a lot of work in upstate New York. So upstate New York has been quite forward leaning for small municipal solar. So the projects there are quite a bit smaller than what we're working on in Alberta, but they're numerous.
Mm.
And so we have a lot of work there. We have a number of clients there, ranging from developers to racking manufacturers that we work for, and we support their projects. We've also had pretty good success when the opportunities have come up in other areas like the Caribbean. So not common, but we do have some projects in our portfolio that we've completed down there, and in some cases they were remediation projects. There was a project that was completely devastated by a hurricane,
Mm.
and we went in to analyze the foundation that was in place and develop a new foundation technology for them to help remediate that particular situation. Finally, I guess what I would say is there's all kinds of growth opportunity projects as well. So I live in Atlantic Canada, and that's one of the reasons I'm on this team. But we're looking to expand our footprint into New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI in particular. We have some project experience in PEI already, and we also have some in Nova Scotia, but we're looking to grow. And
Hmm.
so to answer your question, I think we're working on projects wherever they are, and our name is out there in the renewables field, and people pick up the phone and call PRI Engineering when they need support for solar foundation design.
Education sounds like it's really important for your for PRI. You even have a podcast that's called "It's Soil, Not Dirt," which I love the name of. And tell us about this podcast and what's the end goal?
Well, I think you nailed it in the question. The end goal for any of these learning activities we do is just to increase awareness, increase understanding, and
Hmm.
build our credibility in different circles. And so,
Yeah,
the idea behind a podcast, it's soil, not dirt, is to take a real singular topic, something you can tackle in 15 to 20 minutes, but that maybe there's not a very good understanding about, and then put a team of experts together and talk about it. And
yeah,
hopefully, the listener on the other end goes, oh, okay, I didn't know that. I'll take that back and use it in my normal
yeah,
job. Or even better, when I come across a similar situation, I'll call PRI Engineering because they seem to know what they're doing.
exactly.
So I mean, I think the podcasts are quite effective. They're tailored for a very specific purpose to address one thing. We've also got a whole bunch of, I guess, outreach efforts in the education space. So we're working closely with some secondary institutions in Southern Ontario. So we're tied to a couple high schools in Lindsay, Ontario, and we're working with their science teachers and some of their folks to just bring awareness to what we do. We participate in some of their science and engineering competitions, and we offer our professional advice and leadership when we can. We've got a webinar series on LinkedIn, which has had pretty good success. We just ran one last week. We have white papers which we publish and we submit to professional conferences, technical conferences. So we're all over the place. I think we cast a big net when it comes to learning. And it's really a twofold purpose, right? We're trying to increase awareness about what we do, but we're also trying to help people understand a little bit more about what they see or what they don't see specifically. Yeah.
Exactly. Risk management, we were talking briefly about it earlier. For these big scale projects, there needs to be a reassurance that things won't fail down the road. So what are your thoughts on risk management and putting that all together?
I guess I'll start by saying in a different life, I shouldn't say in a different life, but in a different role, I actually was leading a project, a large scale utility project, which had a big solar component. And I think underpinning everything we did on that project, we were trying to mitigate risk, to minimize it to the point where you could be comfortable making a decision and moving forward. PRI Engineering is a consulting firm that I would say is in the business of mitigating risk for projects. Okay, and I can say that because I hired them when I was a project manager. That's how I met the team at PRI Engineering. And at any point, if you can mitigate risk on a project, that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. Now, there's always a balance, right? You cannot get caught into the trap where you're continually trying to minimize risk such that there is no risk. I don't think that will ever happen on a large project. But you should be able to get it to a point where it's palatable for yourself, for the client, for the contractor, for the owner. I want to speak a little bit more specifically to how PRI Engineering could do it. Look, I think if you're going to put something in the ground, you need to understand the ground. And I know what the selling line that I got sold was that, the hardest part about some of these solar jobs is getting it out of the ground. Once you've got the foundation, the remainder of the solar array should come together quite easily. Now, I don't want to oversimplify what everyone else does and their different parts, but there is some truth to that. So if you can investigate the subsurface conditions, if you can test them, if you can design for them, then I think you're in a much better position as a project leader or a developer or a contractor than you would be if you didn't and you just went ahead with a certain assumption and carry that assumption forward. So risk management's about busting down assumptions, validating things and understanding them. And we can do that specifically when it comes to solar foundation design.
Well, clients are looking for, I would imagine, warranty, in an industry that I guess one could say where regulations could be tightened up a bit. Do you think we should do more along the regulations, to help secure warranties and design?
Yeah, tough question, because I'm of two minds. Where I'm working right now within PRI Engineering, I think it's important to recognize that, a design engineering firm or a consulting engineering firm, we don't deal in warranties per se, right? So that's, I would kind of tie that to a product. A product owner will give you a warranty for something. The business we're in, we're not into warranties. But I acknowledge the point. I think what's really important to note, and I'm going to kind of take apart what you said about regulations and maybe look at it a different way. I think while regulations are important, it's a double-edged sword as well. And what I would suggest is, as a designer and as an engineer and a consultant, what we really need to be interested in is standards. But there's also a fine line there where it's really important to allow a designer or an engineer some freedom of thought, some flexibility in design, so that you're not just, following a process start to finish, but you have the ability to come up with creative solutions. So I guess there's always going to be a tension in between, speed, freedom of design, and regulation. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think it's something that needs to be recognized, that there's different aspects to this. And if you're looking at it through the lens of a developer, well, you might say, well, more regulation is bad. Or if you're looking at it through the lens of an owner, you might say, you know what, maybe some more regulation would be good here. Through my eyes and through the lens of an engineer, I would say it's good and bad, and you just need to understand it and work within it, but also not be a slave to it.
Right.
Yeah.
What's next for PRI Engineering?
Well, I would say what's next for us is growth. And I'll speak to three things, but the first thing is growth. There is a lot of growth in different business lines that we're not currently or maybe actively pursuing. And I think infrastructure is one of them. We've really made a name for ourselves in solar and renewables, but I think we could do better in other areas. And I'm thinking about infrastructure. I'm thinking about materials testing. I'm thinking about some of these areas that aren't directly related to renewables, but are maybe more traditional geotechnical business lines. So we need to grow in those areas. I think we need to expand, and I would say expand strategically, not expand just because. And the expansion will come with business. And one of the areas I see us growing is Atlantic Canada. I really do. There is, Nova Scotia, although still not quite to the level that will, and will likely never be what Alberta has been the last couple of years. It is growing, right? There is a lot of potential in Nova Scotia. It's recognized. Investors are in there. Contractors are in these spaces. So I would like to see PRI Engineering grow in Atlantic Canada. And finally, I guess what the last thing I would say for what's next is a term I used to use a lot when I was still in the military is reinforce. I think we need to continually reinforce our strengths. And to date, our strength has really been solar foundation design. So I would love nothing better than for PRI to be the best at that in the business. And there's not a lot of companies that can do what we do, but there are a couple. So I would like us to stand out, and that will be a double down on our current strength, which is solar foundation design.
Excellent. Tom, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
I really encourage people to tune into It's Soil, Not Dirt to check out that podcast. And hopefully we'll hear your voice on it someday.
Oh, goodness. I forgot to say at the beginning, Maria, I'm not a geotechnical engineer, so you probably won't hear me speaking on that one.
Okay.
But I appreciate it. I thank you for having me on. I love talking about PRI Engineering, and I think what you do is great as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
That was Tom St. Onge talking about how PRI Engineering is working from the ground up in renewable energy. This podcast is sponsored by the Smart Energy event. It's held each year here in Halifax, and it's where smart renewable energy people gather. I'm your host, Maria McGowan. Thanks for listening in today. See you next time.